50 days transformed by prayer.
Hello, boys and girls. Today, I am going to tell you a story of something that happened in a land far away. But first, we're going to talk about a Bible verse. In Mark 11, verse 24, it says, "Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours." Have you ever been really afraid and you needed to pray and ask God to help you? Well, this is a story about a little girl that lived in a country called India that's far, far away. That little girl was my mother, and she told me this story when I was a little girl. So when she was a little girl living in India, she lived in a big school. It was called a boarding school. And a little ways from the boarding school was a little town. Now, one day when she was about 10 years old, she was walking from school to the town. On the way to the town, she heard a monkey in the tree. So living in India is very different than living where we live. There are different animals that live in India that we never see here in Canada, except when we go to a zoo. So she knew that one monkey in a tree wasn't a big problem. But as she continued walking down the road on her way to town, she heard another monkey on the other side of the road. As the monkeys made a whole bunch of noise, more and more monkeys came out of the forest and started making a lot of noise in the trees. All of a sudden, all the monkeys came out of the trees and stood on the road so she couldn't get past. Now, when that happens, monkeys can be sometimes very dangerous. When they all get together in a big group, sometimes they can pull your hair or pull your clothes or even bite you. So she knew that this situation might be a little dangerous. So immediately, she remembered her teachers always told her to pray if you got into a situation that you didn't know what to do. So she did. She prayed, "Oh Jesus, please help me get through these monkeys or protect me from these monkeys." So after she opened her eyes, she suddenly thought, she had remembered that when adults see a whole group of monkeys together, sometimes they take a big long rifle and shoot it into the air, and the sound of the bang scares the monkeys away. So she thought, I wonder if I could do that. I don't have a gun, I don't have a rifle, but I wonder. And she looked at one side of the road and then looked on the other, and she saw a great big stick that looked something like this. So she said, I wonder if I could pretend it was a rifle. So she went and grabbed the stick, put it up in the air like this, and went in her loudest voice, bang! And she looked at the monkeys, and the monkeys' eyes grew big. And then she said again, bang! In her loudest voice. At the second bang, the monkeys ran into the jungle and disappeared. And she ran as fast as her little legs could carry her back to the town. That was an answer to prayer. When she got to the town, she said, "Thank you, God, for answering my prayer and putting that stick by the road and showing me what to do." So remember, if you're ever afraid, there's always someone there. His name is Jesus.
My name is Audrey Makuromore. Today I'm going to share a story about how prayer has worked in my life, and I'm going to talk about my mother. God has answered most of my prayers, as I would have prayed for, but today I'm impressed to share about my mom. So my mom has been sick for the longest time that I know. Ever since I was a child, she struggled with her health. We're always in fear that she's going to die at any moment, but we don't know what she's suffering from. And last 2 years before I came here, my mom really got sick and she had to be admitted. So we took her to the hospital in the morning and she was just complaining, she wasn't feeling well, and we thought we were just going to go to the hospital and come back. But as soon as we got to the hospital, the doctors didn't even look at her, they immediately admitted her. And within 20 minutes of admission, she was already on oxygen, she had catheters inserted in her, and we were just shocked how serious it was. And then they ran a lot of tests later to find out that she had a heart problem. It was a difficult time for me and my family. I just finished my degree and I hadn't even graduated yet. And this was around May of 2015. And I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. I was going to lose my mom. She is the stronghold in our family. She taught me everything that I know, and she was just going to die before my eyes. It was a difficult time, and I'm the firstborn, so I had to carry my siblings and tell them that it's going to be okay, even though the doctors were saying the future is not bright. I would go and see my mom every day. She would look frail, she would look weaker, and I could see her. I'm losing my mom. I remember going back home, I would say, Lord, I'm going to pray. I would bow down on my knees and I would hold my Bible. Before I say any word, tears would flow from my cheeks. I couldn't stop crying. I could not say a word. And I would just get off my knees and I would say, Lord, you've heard me. Even though I didn't say words, I believed and found comfort in the words of Psalm 56, verses 8 and 9. And it says, you tell my wanderings, you put my tears in a bottle. Are they not before thee? When I cry before you and my enemies turn back, I know that you are with me. So I believed God understood my tears, even though I didn't have words. He still understood what I was saying. He understood the hurt that I had. And my mom also prayed when she was in the hospital. And she said, Lord, I have these little children. Who's going to take care of them? What's going to become of them when I die? So God answered all our prayers. We had family and friends coming to pray that this situation would change. My mom didn't get better, but she was discharged and she came home. We were looking after her at home and she just kept on going worse. But I kept on praying and crying before the Lord. The Lord is a merciful God. He is the God of healing. My mother got better, or at least we thought she was better. So she started going back to work. Then one day, she just collapsed. We didn't know what to do again, and it became a cycle. And up to this day, my mom is sick. She's on and off. But I find comfort in God because I know things could have gone bad that very day that she was admitted, but He gave her another chance to live. Not mentioning all the other times when she was really, really sick, but God still managed to pull her through. I don't know what you're praying for in your life, but I just want you to know that Isaiah 65 verse 24, God says, and it shall come to pass that before they call, I shall answer. And whilst they speak, I shall hear. God may answer your prayer in the way you've asked for. He might choose not to say yes. He might say no. He might say wait. Or He might give you exactly what you asked for. But I've learned to trust in Him because everything He does for me is for the best. And I'm grateful that He always answers prayer.
50 days transformed by prayer.
John Newton is the author of many hymns, including Amazing Grace. It is amazing to see how grace and transformation are breathed out from his poetry. In one of his most admirable thoughts, Newton wrote, I am not what I ought to be. Ah, how imperfect and deficient. I am not what I wish to be. I abhor what is evil, and I would cleave to what is good. I am not what I hope to be. Soon, soon I shall put off mortality, and with mortality all sin and imperfection. Yet though I am not what I ought to be, nor what I wish to be, nor what I hope to be, I can truly say I am not what I once was, a slave to sin and Satan. I can heartily join with the apostle and acknowledge, by the grace of God, I am what I am. What an amazing writing. This process of transformation, as described by John Newton, illustrates beautifully Jesus' desire. In his supplication found in his priestly prayer in John 17, after praying for himself, Jesus then begins to pray for his disciples. As you have seen before, he intercedes that his followers be protected from disunity. Christ also prays that they can live the fullness and joy that heaven gives. Now Jesus is interceding that his followers may understand the process of transformation, which is the process we have come to know as sanctification. This process has nothing to do with a perfect life without sin, but rather the understanding of living a life in loving obedience to God. Here are Christ's words found in John 17. I do not pray that you should take them out of the world, but that you should keep them from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. Sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, I also have sent them into the world. And for their sakes I sanctify myself, that they also may be sanctified by the truth. Realistically, God could take us to heaven the moment we were saved. However, he leaves us here on earth so that we may develop and grow and make a difference in the world. However, in the process we see risks. For this reason, Christ prays for protection against the evil that the world offers. We cannot deny that the world is our home, but we do not belong to the world. Although the world is the object of our mission, it should not be the Lord of our affections. We must live in the world, but the world must not live in us. This distinction separates us as strangers and pilgrims in this earth, heading to the promised land. It is interesting to see the connection between the believers and the world in Jesus' prayer in John 17. In verse 6, Jesus is teaching that the believers were given from the world. But in verses 11 to 15, the believers were left in the world. In verse 14, the believers do not belong to the world. They are hated by the world. And in verse 15, it says that the believers should be kept protected from the world's evil one and ways. In verse 18, that the believers should be sent to the world, and in verse 20, that the believers preach Jesus, his word, to the world. At no time during this reading do we see the believers being of this world. On the contrary, we see the call for them to go to the world. Jesus' prayer is for protection for his followers while they are in the world. Protection against temptation and the forces of evil. Now let us make something very clear. To be protected does not mean to be kept outside the world. We cannot make the same mistakes as Israel did to try and create an exclusive world. Ellen White in Acts of the Apostles wrote, "The people of Israel lost sight of their high privileges as God's representatives. They forgot God and failed to fulfill their holy mission. The blessings they received brought no blessings to the world. All their advantages they appropriated for their own glorification. They shut themselves away from the world in order to escape temptation. The restriction that God had placed upon their association with idolaters as a means of preventing them from conforming the practices of the heathen, they used to build up a wall of separation between themselves and all other nations. They robbed God of the service he required of them, and they robbed their fellow men of religious guidance and holy example." Salt only has effect outside of the salt shaker. However, God needs to preserve us, his salt, that which is in the world and not of the world. For this to happen, we now look at Christ's second important request found in John 17:17. And it reads, "Sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth." You see, to sanctify means to separate, to dedicate completely to God's use. So again, being separated out of God includes much more than just being separated from the world. It is to be equipped to do his work and to continue in him. It is this whole process of spiritual development that is many times talked about as a daily walk with God. That happens through prayer and Bible study. It is only through this daily communion with the Creator that we remain faithful, even though we live lives in this world and still reach out to the world. So do you understand what God expects from you as his follower? That you do not fall into the traps and snares of this world, but that you make a difference in this world. Do you fully understand that only by being in daily communion with God can we be faithful to his mission for us? Are you willing to separate time out daily to be with God? To make a difference where you live, work, study? Cry out to God at this very moment. Pray that He conserves you to be able to be a faithful light to this world. As you pray now, remember that prayer is the key in the hand of faith to unlock heaven's storehouse, where are treasured the boundless resources of omnipotence.